Well, I think the economic credentials of Des Moines are pretty good. I mean, he's managed the economy pretty well. There's been a balance of spending. There's been a balance of keeping the budget under control. So we've maintained this budget surplus, which is a bipartisan approach from both the Labor Party and the coalition. We've got to maintain a budget surplus. We've got to keep our AAA credit rating. Victoria is the only state that has a triple-grade credit rating without any qualifications. So that's the foundation of the policy. But having said that, he probably hasn't got the message across that he's been a good manager and he's kept the trams running on time, more or less, kept businesses turning over.
Do you think he's leaving the state in a good position heading into this election? The outlook's good?
Interesting use of the word leaving, because he may well be leaving the Premier's office in a week's time. I think the big question is that's the big question. Not so much whether the government has done the right thing, but whether the Victorian economy is in the greatest of shape. We were riding the mining boom by providing the professional services to the mining boom, legal, accounting and so on. And as that started to fall away, we discovered this property investment boom. That was obviously assisted by the government, with Matthew Guy signing off on all those Melbourne buildings. So whether you call it a bubble or whether you call that sustaining the economic activity in Victoria, that's certainly been the case over the last couple of years. That's probably going to begin to tail off, and then the question is going to be what's left, because that's when we'll discover that we don't have a manufacturing industry anymore. It'll be coinciding with the closure of the car plants, and that'll have a big negative ripple effect through small business. So it's really going to be posed to the next government. What is the Victorian economy? What are the strengths of the Victorian economy now? Used to be manufacturing, hiding behind a tariff wall. That's gone. So I think in sort of by the first part of 2015 could be okay. When we get into 2016, and this is irrespective of what's happening to the rest of the economy, both the global economy and the broader Australian economy, the question really is going to be posed for Victoria: what is actually going to drive our growth? What is going to drive our prosperity?
So there are some significant challenges coming ahead. You've seen Mr. Andrews on the campaign trail so far. Are you confident that he could handle those challenges?
Well, I think there's a core bipartisan commitment to the sort of basics, but that's not really going to be enough. I think the next government is going to have to be proactive. So that leads you immediately to say, well, let's hope it's not another hung parliament. We want a government that will be able to make decisions, will be able to respond to the questions when they are posed, whether it's Labor, whether it's coalition. And what we really need from a government who's going to be proactive is who understands that Victoria does face some challenges 2 years out and ongoing, and wants to be proactive about making Victoria a better place for business. And that's the big question mark over a returned Labor government. Its links to the unions, particularly the CMFEU. We don't want to have a government that's reluctant to keep the unions under control. We want a government that, as part of a broader proactive policy, won't kowtow to the unions and will be really helping business meet the challenges of, they have to be super flexible, they have to be super 24/7 real time in terms of seizing opportunities and responding to challenges.
Now, for a lot of the public, if there's one issue that's defined this entire campaign, it's been the East-West Link tunnel. A lot of critics seem to argue that it will be a very inefficient piece of infrastructure. Are you worried about such an expensive thing coming on as there are clouds hanging over the horizon? I
think the East-West is a really challenging issue because it probably is a necessary part of the Victorian transport infrastructure. But the big question is it worth spending that much money on it, and therefore you don't spend that money somewhere else on transport infrastructure? We're going to find out, of course, as time goes on. Interestingly, at the community forum down in Frankston, you had a small businessman raise the issue that the East-West Link is actually critical to a whole swathe of businesses from the peninsula up to the Yarra Valley, which wants to get stuff through to the western part of the city, both whether into the port or into the airport, and then bringing tourists back from the airport. So I think it's an important part of the link, but it's a question of whether it's worth spending that much money or whether we should be spending it somewhere else. We've got a sort of an interesting / a slightly depressing debate. The main focus seems to be east-west on the part of the government versus I'm going to eliminate all those old level crossings on the part of Daniel Andrews. I don't think that's showing really a full appreciation of the bigger picture that Victoria faces in terms of how does it meet the challenges of the 21st century.